Hello everyone. Today we will be taking upon the chordate part of the animal kingdom. So far we have discussed about the non-chordates. The non-chordates includes the following phylum, that is the Porifera, the Coelenterata, the Ctenophora, the Platyhelminthes, Aschelminthes, Mollusca, Echinodermata, and finally we have taken the Hemichordata, which earlier was taken to be a part of the chordata, but when it was proved that the notochord, which was falsely considered as a notochord in these organisms, were not notochord, they were the proboscis or the stomochord, and although they had a similar characteristic of that of the phylum chordata, that is they had the characteristic of presence of gill slits, but alone gill slits is not the necessary criteria to be taking the hemichordata under the phylum called the chordata. So they were separately dealt into a new phylum and they were considered as a small group of organisms, the marine organisms belonging to that of the hemichordata. Today we will take upon the chordates. Now, as the name suggests, chordates, that means they have the presence of a notochord in their body in some stage of their life. Now, what is this notochord? Notochord is a solid cartilaginous structure which is present in an organism, and those organisms which have this notochord, they will be called as your chordates. Now, this notochord in some organisms in the later stages of life is replaced by that of the vertebral column. So those organisms in which the notochord is replaced by that of the vertebral column, they will be considered as the subphylum Vertebrata. But other than these organisms, the other group of organisms which have the notochord either in the head portion from head to tail as it is present, they are called as your Cephalochordata. The cephalon word has come from brain. So this way you can understand, or you can keep it in your mind, that the group of organisms or the subphyla Cephalochordata means having the notochord from the head, that is cephalon portion, brain portion. So from the head to the tail region in their life, that will be considered as your Cephalochordata. Whereas the Urochordata, or as it is also known as your Tunicata, are the group of organisms in which the notochord is present in the larval stage. Okay, so those organisms, why they are called Tunicata? Because their body is covered by a waterproof, flexible, tunic-like structure, membranous structure. So because of that, they are sometimes also known as your Tunicata. And Urochordata, Uro means in the posterior region of the body, in the tail region of the body. So those organisms, those chordates which have the notochord in the tail region of their body, they will be considered as your Urochordata. So depending upon the notochord, its location, and whether it is replaced by vertebral column, the chordates have been further classified into three subphyla, that is your Urochordata or Tunicata, Cephalochordata, and finally the Vertebrata. Now these two, Urochordata and Cephalochordata, has the organisms which show some primitive kind of characteristics. So they are sometimes togetherly known as your Protochordata. So in some books you will find that the chordates have been divided into Protochordates and that of the vertebrates, but again the Protochordates have been further divided into that of Urochordata and Cephalochordata. But as we are going according to our book, so according to our book we have the three subphyla, that is the Urochordata, the Cephalochordata, and the Vertebrata. Now these organisms which are in Urochordata and Cephalochordata, they are quite primitive kind of organisms. They are marine. The sexes of course are separate. For the process of fertilization, some needs water body for the process of fertilization. And example of Urochordata is your Ascidia, whereas Salpa is also there. Whereas the Cephalochordata, the organism belonging to the Cephalochordata is your Branchiostoma. Okay, now let us take upon the Vertebrata, to which we also belong to. Now Vertebrata are the group of organisms in whom the notochord is present in the embryonic stage, and this notochord is replaced by that of the vertebral column. They have the spinal cord, and that spinal cord is hollow spinal cord is surrounded by that of the vertebral column. They have the dorsal nerve cord, they have this notochord, they have the pharyngeal gill slits, then they have the post-anal tail. Besides this, they have even the ventral position of the heart. So all these characteristics are the, you can say, the common characteristics of the subphylum, that is that of your Vertebrata. Now Vertebrata is further divided into two divisions, okay, two groups. One is called as your Agnatha and another one is called as your Gnathostomata. Now what is the meaning, or depending upon what it has been divided? It is a subphylum. It is divided into two groups or two divisions. What are these? Agnatha. A means absent. So what is absent? Jaws are absent. So those organisms in which true jaws, this lower jaw, is absent in the organisms, they belong to this group of organisms which is called as your Agnatha. Very few group of organisms are there, and as a result they have only one class under this division Agnatha, and that is called as your Cyclostomata. Okay, now the organisms belonging to Cyclostomata, how do they look like? Now these organisms are peculiar in the sense that they have an elongated, slender body. They are all marine in nature. They have that is the endoskeleton, which is made up of that of your cartilage, their brain, their inside, whatever the solid structures are there, that is made up of your cartilage. They have 6 to 15 pairs of gill slits, okay, and they do not have true jaws, of course, and their mouth is peculiar in the sense most of these organisms are ectoparasites on the other fishes, so they derive nutrition from the body of the other fishes, and they have a mouth which is circular and which is suctorial. Okay, and they have unpaired fins. Okay, so that is the thing. The heart is two chambered. Of course, the heart is ventral in position. So these are the characteristics belonging to the organism of the class Cyclostomata, which in turn belongs to that of the Agnatha. The next division along with that of Agnatha in the Vertebrata is called as your Gnathostomata. Now when it is Gnathostomata, Gnatho means having the jaws. So all those organisms which are vertebrates and have jaws, true jaws in them, they will be belonging to this Gnathostomata. Now this Gnathostomata is further divided into two superclass. Now see students, when we have studied about the taxonomical hierarchy, we have read the 7 steps of taxonomical hierarchy, and during that time, if you remember, I have told you that these can be further broken into subdivisions like subclass, subfamily. Okay, likewise it's a super class also. Okay, subclass, superclass. So many are there, many further breaking, or you can say this divisions are there of the taxonomical hierarchy. Now Gnathostomata is further divided into two superclasses, and what are they? PCS and Tetrapoda. Okay, now Pisces or PCS, as you may pronounce it, it is superclass, and it has two classes. It has two classes in it. What are it? What are those? One is Chondrichthyes and another one is called as your Osteichthyes. Chondrichthyes means those organisms whose endoskeleton is made up of cartilage. Okay, so basically those fishes or those organisms which have the endoskeleton made up of cartilage, they belong to that of the Chondrichthyes. And Osteichthyes are the bony fishes, those organisms which have the endoskeleton which is made up of bone. Otherwise, if you see, Chondrichthyes also is having two-chambered heart. Osteichthyes is also having two-chambered heart. Another difference is that Osteichthyes they are oviparous, whereas Chondrichthyes are viviparous. Many of them are viviparous. Okay, Chondrichthyes. The fertilization, if you see, the fertilization is internal in them, whereas Osteichthyes, the fertilization is external in them. Okay, so similarities are there. Similarities in the sense that they have the true jaws, and if you see the position of the mouth of these organisms belonging to that of the Chondrichthyes and that of the Osteichthyes. In case of Chondrichthyes, if the body is like that, mouth is a ventral position, that means lower. If this is a snout, because they have a streamlined body, so if this is a snout, the lower portion of the snout will be having the mouth in case of Chondrichthyes. They do not have swim bladders, and as a result they have to constantly swim in the water to prevent them from sinking into the water. Okay, the male bear claspers. The pelvic fin of the male, it is acting as a claspers to hold the female during the time of copulation, for the process of ejaculation of the sperm and for the process of internal fertilization. As far as Osteichthyes is concerned, the body of the Chondrichthyes is streamlined again. Now the terminal mouth is found in case of the Osteichthyes, okay, and they have the swim bladders in them which prevent them from sinking into the water when they are not swimming. So these are the fundamental difference between that of the Chondrichthyes and Osteichthyes. Okay. The next is tetrapoda. As the name suggests, poda means legs. So those organisms which will be having two pairs of limbs. See, here it is not necessary that how many pairs of paired or unpaired. Mostly the Chondrichthyes have unpaired fins, but Osteichthyes, they have the paired fins. But as far as the tetrapoda goes, they have the two pair of limbs. Now these limbs can be modified in different ways in case of different organisms to help them to live in the different kinds of habitats. Because some of them are terrestrial, some are semi-aquatic. That means they need both water and land for them to survive. So let us see what are the various classes in case of the tetrapoda. So tetrapoda is a super class. Under it we have the 4 classes. What are these 4 classes? The first class is your Amphibia. Now Amphibia, we all know that Amphibia means those organisms which can live both in water as well as on land. So now why do they do so? The reason is because in them there is external fertilization. So if it is external fertilization, they need some agents for the purpose of helping the sperms and the eggs to meet with each other so that the fertilization can be effected. So that's the reason why the Amphibia lay eggs in the water, and it is the waves of the water or the water current which will be helping the eggs as well as the sperm to fertilize or fuse with it. A lot of energy is wasted, a lot of sperm is wasted, a lot of egg is wasted, and if the fertilization is effective also in the water, then also all of them do not convert themselves into that of the young ones. The reason is because there are various predator organisms in the water which can eat those fertilized zygotes, and as a result very few population can survive. So Amphibia, they have a wet skin, a moist skin. They have various forms of respiration. They can respire by means of gills, they can respire by means of that is their skin, cutaneous respiration we call it. They can respire by means of the lungs also, okay. And the organisms belonging to Amphibia, they show indirect mode of development. That means their larval stage and the adult stage are not same. They undergo metamorphosis before they come finally to the adult stage. You may have noticed about the frogs. In case of frogs, there is tadpole, the larval stage, and followed by the adult frog. How differently they appear to be. Of course, the sexes are separate. Sex dimorphism is seen in case of the organisms belonging to that of the Amphibia. They have head, they have a trunk, they have 2 pairs of limbs, and the limbs are mainly modified in case of frogs and all for hopping purpose on the land, and they have webs in between so that they can swim in the water. And they have ear on the 2 sides of the head, but that ear begins with that of the tympanum. They don't have an external ear like that of us. They have eyelids, and that is how the organisms belonging to that of the Amphibia are. Next we have the class which is called Reptilia. The organisms belonging to Reptilia are the true land animals. These organisms, although some of them you might have noticed that they are found in water bodies like that of the crocodiles, like that of the tortoise, but what is the way to find out that whether the organism is an amphibia or that of the reptile is that the reptiles will never lay their eggs in water. They will always look for lands to lay the eggs, whereas the amphibians, these will always lay the their egg in the water because they need the external agency, water, for the process of fertilization. The reptiles, the organ of breathing in them is of course the lungs. They have dry and cornified scales, the horny type of skin they have. They have the practice of shedding their skin like we have seen in case of the snakes. They have the heart which is 3.5 chambered. I forgot to tell you that in case of the amphibians, the heart is 3 chambered. That is, they have 2 auricles and 1 ventricle. Whereas if you see the reptiles, they have the auricles separated and the ventricles. And the septation is beginning, but the septation is not completed. So sometimes we call it as your 3.5 chambered heart. Of course, crocodile is an exception in the Reptilia which have a 4 chambered heart. These are the cold-blooded organisms organisms like that of the Amphibia and that of the Pisces, and they lay eggs. And the development in case of reptiles is the direct development, that is the young ones and the adult, they look very similar with that respect to each other. After the reptiles, the next is the Aves. Now the organisms belonging to the Aves are the organisms from where the warm-blooded organisms begin. So far up to Reptilia, all the organisms were poikilotherms, but from this Aves is the organisms which is homeotherm. The skin is dry, but externally it is covered with that of fine feathers, and these feathers have sometimes the oil glands, of course, at the base of the tail. And these organisms, they have the mouth which is in the form of beak. They have two nostrils on the surface of the beak like structure. They have the hind limbs which is meant for perching, for clasping the branches, in which sometimes you will find the birds are sleeping at night without getting fallen from the branches. Their forelimb is modified into wings, and of course there are some birds which are flightless birds. In them the forelimb is not having that much strong muscles, and in some birds like that of your penguin, the forelimb is modified into paddle like structure so that they can swim, and they act like a paddle inside the water. They can swim well inside the water. They have 4-chambered heart. So from reptiles there is a transition, that is the heart is 4-chambered. These organisms have strong flight muscles because they have to spend a lot of time in the air. They are arboreal, and they have a lot of air sacs attached to that of their lungs. They have an extra crop and gizzard in their digestive system. I forgot to tell you, in case of your Amphibia, they have a cloaca, which is a common opening for the urinary bladder, for that of the digestive tract, for the reproductive tract. In case of Aves, they have a modification of the digestive system. They have a crop and the gizzard, which helps in the process of digestion. And of course they have hollow bones. They have hollow bones, that is called pneumatic type of bones, which helps them to keep their weight less so that they can fly very easily in the air. And they are oviparous, and that is all about the organisms belonging to Aves. And examples you can write, many are there. Parrot is there, crow is there, ostrich is there, kiwi is there, penguin is there. Okay, next is mammals. This is a final class for the superclass Tetrapoda. In case of mammals, they show erect, not all, but of course the human beings, that is most of the primates. We have not been classifying the mammals into primates and non-primates, but in general we are reading about the mammals. So those organisms which are warm-blooded, which are viviparous, that means give birth to young ones. They have mammary glands. The young ones feed upon the mother's milk. The body is covered by fine hair-like structures. They have lungs as their organ of respiration. They have 4-chambered heart. The organisms belonging to that of the mammals can live in various kinds of habitats. You can find them in desert, in polar regions, in water, in even some mammals can fly also, like that of the bat. But of course the wings of the bat and the wings of the birds are not same. The reason is because in case of bats, it is the extension of the abdominal muscles with the digit of the forelimb which makes it like that of a wing-like structure, which help them to fly. Okay, so sometimes this question comes, how can you prove that bat is a mammal? In that case, you have to say that bats do not have feather. They have hair on their body. They have external pinna. In case of birds or aves, they don't have external pinna. Their ear starts with tympanum. Okay, and of course the birds do not have teeth inside their mouth, but mammals have teeth inside their mouth. So all those characteristics are found in case of bat. That is the reason why bat is a mammal, it is not a bird. Similarly, question comes that how can you say that an elephant, a whale is a mammal because it lives in water. Whale is viviparous. It has lung as the organ of respiration. It has ventral 4-chambered heart. Its body is not having scales, which is characteristic features of the organisms belonging to Pisces. They are like the Chondrichthyes and the Osteichthyes. In case of Chondrichthyes, they have the placoid scales, whereas in case of your Osteichthyes they have the ctenoid scales. So this is the characteristics of the organisms belonging to mammals. The whale give birth to young one, and the young one feeds upon the mother's milk. So that's why whale is also a mammal. So with this we had come to the end of this chapter, Animal Kingdom. And with the characteristic features of all the phylum, you have to study all the phylum's important characteristics, followed by 1 or 2 examples. You see students, it is difficult to memorize the scientific name of all the members of the animals which have been given in your book, but at least from each category you have to memorize 2 organisms name, any 2 organisms name with the scientific name, and of course the common name also, and with the important characteristics and how one of them differ from that of the others. So with this we had come to the end of this chapter. I hope you have understood this chapter well.